After my heart surgery, I didn't get a single text or call from my only son. Months later, just one photo of me standing next to a $340,000 Cadillac Celestiq suddenly reminded him I still existed. "Mom, there's a family gathering tomorrow." I showed up, and this time, I was the one in control. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. The heart monitor beeped steadily, dry and mechanical. I opened my eyes under the white light, my throat parched, my arm heavy from the IV. My hand searched along the edge of the bed for my phone. The screen lit up an empty call log. I tapped the name Ryan. The ringing stretched on, then the voicemail picked up. I spoke slowly, my voice rough from the breathing tube. "Mom just got out of surgery. I'm okay. Call me back when you can." I hung up. The screen went dark, my faint reflection staring back. If I had to introduce myself, I'd say simply, Ava Monroe, 61, living in the suburbs of Portland. Widowed for 10 years. One son, Ryan, the busy one. The door creaked open. The night nurse adjusted the sensors and asked if I was in pain. I nodded. The surgeon followed, eyes on the monitor. His explanation was brief and professional. The surgery went well, avoid exertion for a few days, and I'd go home with a list of prescriptions. I listened, said yes, but my eyes stayed on the doorway. Every time a shadow passed by, my heart lifted only to fall again. Not Ryan. Just carts, pill trays, rubber soles, shuffling by. A flower delivery man knocked and pushed in a bright bouquet of yellow tulips. Before I could smile, he hesitated, checked the tag, and apologized. "Sorry, wrong room." The flowers left, their scent lingering behind. I let out a small laugh that cracked in my dry throat. Last year on my birthday, I'd stuck candles into a small supermarket cake, took a picture, and sent it to Ryan. "Mom's another year older." The little scene icon appeared below it. No reply. No happy birthday. My phone buzzed. A message from the insurance company. Reminder, follow-up appointment. Another from the bank. Balance below threshold. Then an unknown number advertising, but still, not a word from Ryan. I ran my thumb down the list and deleted every message until only one remained, a missed call from the doctor. I kept it, as proof that someone at least had been there that day. At night, this floor grew quiet. The loudest sounds were the heart monitor and the flicker of ambulance lights through the hallway glass. In the next room, a family took turns for the night shift. They whispered, paper bags rustled, a soup container lid popped open. I turned toward the wall, cheek pressed to the cold sheet. A tear slid onto my pillow. I curled tighter, holding my breath until it blended with the steady beep-beep. The next morning, the billing clerk came in with a clipboard. Her pen tapped softly along the lines: deposit, medication, room fee. I looked at the numbers like a flight of stairs too steep to climb. At home, the heating bill, electric bill, credit card. I heard myself ask, "Can I pay in installments?" She nodded. "We can arrange that." I pressed my lips together. The talk about policies, deductibles, and coverage limits, none of it mattered. I would make it work. Sell the old TV, dip into the emergency fund, delay fixing the heater another month. I signed where I was told. The pen trembled. The nurse replaced the bandage on my arm and handed me a list of prescriptions. No heavy lifting, no driving for a week. I nodded. She asked, "Is someone coming to pick you up?" I glanced at my phone. Still silent as stone. "No, I'll call a cab." Before leaving the bed, I called Ryan again. The ringing was long, and once more, it was only the familiar voice of the system. This time, my message was shorter. "Mom's being discharged." That was it. No explanation, no extras. Outside the hospital, rain hit the concrete curb, spreading like thin smoke on the pavement. The taxi driver looked at me in the mirror. "Need help with your bag, ma'am?" I shook my head. The back seat was cold. I held my purse tight against my stomach, the stitches under my thick coat aching faintly. The city drifted by the window like a slow-motion film. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. I gave my address. He nodded and turned on the heater. I thought about the 10 years since David died. I'd been a part-time teacher, then an office assistant, then a night clerk at the library. Every bus ticket, every grocery bill, I underlined in red. When Ryan went to college, I sold my wedding ring. When he went to grad school, I co-signed his first apartment lease. I survived every winter in the same old coat. I rarely bought anything for myself, except good walking shoes, because my heart had been warning me for years. The taxi stopped by my building. I paid the fare and tipped a little small, but it mattered. A habit of staying decent. The driver hesitated. "Anyone waiting for you at home?" I shook my head again. He nodded quietly and said no more. The front door opened with the creak of an old spring. The hallway light flickered, then steadied. I set my bag on the chair and looked around. The air smelled of damp wood, the heater sighed. I turned on the kettle. While waiting, I took out my phone and opened a new message. The words spilled fast across the screen. "Ryan, I went through the surgery. I spent the night alone, listening to laughter from the room next door. I called you. I waited. I don't want to say you're busy or blame you for not caring. I just want you to know I needed to hear your voice." I read it over. Even the words felt out of breath, clinging to something. Slowly, I highlighted them all and hit delete. Then I typed another line short enough to leave no room for hope or disappointment. "Mom's home." I pressed send. The screen stayed still. No typing dots. No read. The kettle whistled, pulling me back to the kitchen. I poured a cup of tea, leaned against the counter, listening to the heater shift gears. The house was old. Every piece of it spoke in its own language of creaks and sighs. I said nothing back. I just breathed, steady, quiet, unadorned. I told myself that tomorrow I'd stand up, even if only to take a slow step across the living room. And if no one remembered me, I'd be the first to call my own name. A week after coming home, I was still walking slowly, like someone relearning how to move. Every step up the stairs felt like a thin blade pressing into my chest. The kitchen was cold. The fridge held half a carton of milk, 3 eggs, and a bit of butter hard as wax. I measured out oatmeal, added water, and simmered it until soft. When it boiled, I turned off the stove, broke a pill in half, and swallowed it with a sip of warm water. I'd written my follow-up appointment on a sticky note in thick marker, stuck right in the middle of the cupboard door. Thursday, 9 a.m. Bills were stacked on the dining table. Heating, electricity, medication. I drew a red line under the note, "Wait for next month's pension," then set the pen down because my hand was shaking. The phone lay face down. I didn't want it to ring. At my age, a ringing phone rarely means anything good. Reminders, verifications, telemarketers. I took a deep breath and checked only the medication reminder. Around noon, I heard the thud of a mail cart on the curb. I opened the door. A stiff envelope, the corners stamped with the logo of Mr. Carter's law office. Inside was a short letter, neatly typed, an invitation to meet regarding additional documentation related to David's estate. I froze. My heart skipped not from pain, but from something between hope and disbelief. David and I had little more than this house, some savings, a few small bonds. I sat down, read the letter twice, and then called to schedule the appointment. On the day of the meeting, Portland was draped in drizzle. The assistant offered me hot tea and asked if the walk had tired me. I nodded, suddenly aware of how rough my old coat looked among the crisp suits passing by. When the wooden door closed, Mr. Carter stood and extended his hand. "Good to see you again, Ava." He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder tied with a cloth ribbon. "I was reviewing David's old records," he said. "There's an investment account under his name, managed by an out-of-state brokerage. When we reviewed the latest report, we found the value had increased substantially. I need to confirm that you are the sole beneficiary." His tone was calm, deliberate, like a math teacher explaining a simple formula. "I don't remember any such account," I admitted. "Seems David started early," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Some familiar stock codes bought when they were still low. I'll make it simple. An old portfolio that's now worth a great deal." He slid a printout in front of me. Company names, share counts, current valuations, no charts, no jargon. Just a quiet tap of his pen against the final figure before he looked up. $28 million. The room was so silent I could hear the assistant's pen tapping in the next office. I looked again, then again. I placed my hand on the paper. It felt cold. "Mr. Carter closed the folder and said, "David kept everything very organized. You're the only beneficiary. The account is still active. We'll coordinate with the brokerage to transfer ownership through standard procedures." "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice dry. "Just confirm your identity and sign the necessary forms." Then it'll take some time to verify and process the transfer. I'll keep you informed every step of the way. Once completed, you'll have full access to the portfolio. We can recommend an independent advisor if you'd like, but that's entirely your choice. He pushed the folder toward me. There's no rush. Take your time. I didn't read it. I looked at the empty space across the table, as if David were sitting there, his hands folded, that gentle smile I knew so well. I didn't cry, not in front of strangers, but my throat tightened. I spoke just loud enough for myself to hear. David always did things quietly. Mr. Carter gave a small nod. He was thorough. The rest is now yours. I signed the acknowledgement. The assistant brought another set of papers, guiding me through the boxes to initial. No legal maze, no fine print traps. Just the keys finally returned to me after a decade locked away in a drawer. David had closed himself. While Mr. Carter stepped out to take a call, I sat alone in the small conference room, my hand still resting on the folder. The name David Monroe was printed in bold on the label, and everything came rushing back. The cold kitchen, the bills stacked high, the wedding ring I'd sold, the surgery, the sleepless hospital nights, the unanswered calls. The tears came quietly, not for the number on the page, but for David, the man who'd gone yet still found a way to shield me from the wind. When Mr. Carter returned, he handed me a tissue. He didn't say a word. That, I thought, was a kindness I'd learned to value the way decent people leave you the silence you need, instead of filling it with advice. "We'll update you later this week," he said as he walked me to the door. "Call if you need anything." When I got home, the house was the same. The floor still creaked in the same spot. The heater still sighed its slow, tired breath. But something had shifted, as if someone had cracked open a window I'd long believed was sealed shut. I touched my chest. The heartbeat was steady now, unaccompanied by machines. For years, my life had orbited around one person, Ryan. Whenever I needed a call, there was only silence. But David, the quiet man who left this world 10 years ago, had still found a way to leave me shelter. From this day on, I will stand up on my own and use what David left, not to fill the emptiness my son chose to create, but to nurture what's kind and good in the world. 2 weeks later, I took Mr. Carter's folder, got behind the wheel of my old sedan, and drove to the Cadillac dealership in Portland. The glass doors slid open automatically. I stood still for a moment, gathering myself. The sales manager saw me and smiled, as though he'd been expecting me. "What model would you like to see today?" he asked, calm and professional. I pointed to the far corner, where a Cadillac Celestiq sat quietly under the showroom lights, deep black. I walked closer, letting my hand glide along the contour of its hood. I didn't need anyone to tell me it already looked like an answer. The manager spoke in a low, measured voice. "The cabin is exceptionally quiet. The seats are handcrafted. The driver, assist systems will support you on long drives. Smooth engine ideal for those who prefer a gentle ride." I nodded. "I don't drive fast. I just want to move without feeling tired." He understood and gestured to a technician. We exchanged keys at the counter, a small tag labeled Demo hanging from the ring. I sat down. The seat embraced my back, holding me steady. When the door closed, the world outside fell silent by half. "We can test it on the Riverside Road," the technician said. "It's less busy there." The tires rolled out of the lot, and when I pressed the pedal, it felt like touching a harp string. The hum was warm, alive. The sky was clear. The river unfolded ahead, rows of bare trees streaming backward like a film in rewind. My hands stayed firm on the wheel. I breathed deeply. Minutes passed before my shoulders began to lower, my neck unclenched. The beeping of hospital monitors faded somewhere far behind, replaced by another rhythm, the steady pulse of my own chest. The technician pointed to the buttons on the steering wheel, explaining how to activate lane assist, how to set the following distance. His tone was modest, not performative. I followed his instructions and felt the pedals lighten the car, offered help, not control. I only needed to guide the direction. It handled the weight. Maybe that's why I wanted it. Not for someone to decide for me, but for something to share the hard parts. When we circled back to the lot, I already knew. The manager asked, "Would you like to consider a few more models, or—" "I'll take this one," I said. "Simple black. No contrasting trim. I don't care for loud details." He raised an eyebrow at my quick decision but didn't press. "When would you like delivery?" "Whenever you're ready." "I can wait." We'll call you as soon as the paperwork's done, he said. Would you like to discuss pricing? I don't bargain. I cut in. Just call me when it's ready. He smiled. Of course. On delivery day, the manager waited in the lobby, handed me the keys, and opened the car door like unveiling a quiet room. The technician showed me the basics. Seat memory, emergency assist, heated seats. I listened closely, tried each one. Door open, door close, a hush of air in between. I breathed in the scent of new leather not to boast, but to remind myself that I was here. Congratulations, Mrs. Ava, the manager said as we stood under the awning. If you ever need anything, just come back. I will, I replied. But not because something's wrong. I took the long way home. At every red light, I looked at my reflection in the mirror, not brighter, but steadier. As I turned up the slope toward my house, I eased off the gas, letting the car crawl, as if testing its patience. It didn't roar. It didn't complain. In front of the porch, I parked, shut off the engine, no rush. I stood beside it, leaned lightly against the door, and raised my phone. One frame only, me, the car, the porch shadow. No tilt of the head, no victory sign. I thought carefully, then typed the caption, "Heart recovered." No punctuation, no emojis. I hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed post. The screen spun, then went still. I set the phone face down on the table and went to the kitchen to boil water for tea. As I held the warm kettle, I heard the notifications start to chime from the wooden counter, one line, then two, then several. I let them be. Another minute, then another. When I finally picked up the phone, the screen was filled with messages from old friends. Beautiful Ava. Congratulations on your strong heart. When will you take me for a ride? I smiled politely and replied with simple thanks. I set the phone down again, carried the teapot out to the porch, and sat on the steps. I closed my eyes, allowing myself a rare moment of stillness. When I opened them, the screen was glowing, vibrating longer this time. One name filled it, not the bank, not the insurance company. Ryan. I watched the phone buzz until the second ring began. The skin at my neck tightened, then eased. I took a deep breath, pressed accept, and lifted the phone to my ear. On the other end, his voice came rushing in, bright and breathless, like a car rolling downhill. "Mom, I just saw—" "I'm here," I said. Ryan's voice burst through the phone like someone who'd just struck gold. "Mom, I just saw the photo. A Cadillac Celestiq? That's incredible. When did you buy it?" "Last night," I said, keeping my tone even. "It must have cost a fortune," Ryan chuckled. "How'd you pull that off? Hit the jackpot or something?" "I didn't think you cared that much about what I do," I replied. There was a pause. Then he recalibrated, softening his voice. "I'm just glad you're doing better, really. Oh, tomorrow we're having a family get-together in Westchester. It's little Ellie's birthday. You should come. Everyone would love to see you. I'll see what I can do." Ryan added a layer of warmth that didn't quite sound like him. "You can stay a few days if you want. The house is big. I'd love to catch up, talk about life, you know. Family stuff. I miss you, Mom." "All right," I said. "I'll let you know." I hung up. The kitchen was quiet. Rain began to fall steadily, tapping against the window frame. I leaned my hands on the counter to steady myself, then opened the cupboard and took out the small wooden box where I kept things I couldn't forget. David's handwritten letter from 10 years ago. The paper now yellowed along the folds. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, just one line. "Live by what you believe." I placed the letter on the table. For a moment, it felt like someone had just taken the seat across from me. The silence no longer felt empty. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Carter's office. His assistant answered, professional, yet kind. "We can schedule a meeting later today or tomorrow morning." "Today," I said. "I want to begin the process of establishing a foundation in David's name." The small conference room felt familiar now. Mr. Carter listened quietly, pen resting across the page. I spoke slowly, directly. "The goal is to support middle-aged women starting over. Small projects, practical ones. No fancy mission statements. I just want a simple, solid way to ensure the money goes where it should." He nodded. "We'll proceed carefully, establish the initial capital, create transparent management guidelines, and form an independent board. Step by step, no rush. You'll have the final say on every decision." The assistant brought in a binder of sample documents, charters, selection criteria, interview schedules, usage agreements. I read each page, marking in red. Priority women who've been overlooked. Priority plans that can begin with little funding. I underlined the section on public progress reports and added a small allowance for unexpected expenses so recipients wouldn't feel strangled by perfection. For the legal setup, Mr. Carter said, "We'll coordinate with a community fund management firm to prevent conflicts of interest. The name will be the David Monroe Foundation. Is that acceptable?" "It is," I said. After some discussion, the preliminary framework was settled. What remained was time and patience. That night, Portland's rain fell like a slow scattering of seeds. I opened the closet and pulled out my small suitcase. Prescription meds were packed in labeled pouches. I moved my checkup appointment to next week and called the clinic to confirm. The foundation folder went into the center of the suitcase, tucked beside David's letter. I added a small blue notebook, a black felt pen, and a cropped wedding photo that fit neatly into my wallet. Nothing more. Near midnight, I called a cab to the airport an hour earlier than planned. I wasn't sleepy, but I wasn't tired either. My phone buzzed. A message from Ryan lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you, Mom." I pressed the power button, turning the screen dark, like switching off an unnecessary light. At the security checkpoint, I slipped off my coat and shoes. Everyone else seemed in a rush. I wasn't. I double-checked the envelope holding the foundation papers, brushed my fingers along the edge of David's letter, then slid the tray through the scanner. The security officer smiled and reminded me not to forget my medications. I thanked her. There were a few empty seats near the gate. I chose one far from the TV screens. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day, foundation launch." This time, I didn't need anyone's permission to show up. The car pulled up in front of a perfectly trimmed white fence. I stepped out, hand gripping the strap of my old canvas bag. The front door opened. Lydia appeared, beige dress, polite smile, just the right amount of warmth. Her eyes flicked briefly to my simple bag before returning to their practiced friendliness. "You made it. Was the drive all right?" Lydia tilted her head slightly, her perfume soft as a period at the end of a sentence. "I'm fine," I said, nodding. Ryan came out from inside, one arm giving me a quick, half-hearted hug, the other still holding his phone. "Hey, Mom, you're here. Great. Come in, everyone's waiting to blow out the candles." The house was cool inside. Staff moved rhythmically through the hall, silver trays catching the light. The living room opened into a grand dining space, white tablecloth, candles lined down the table, a massive floral centerpiece like a movie set. The kids darted through, sneakers squeaking against the wood floor. They seated me at the far end of the table, a good distance from the unicorn-shaped birthday cake. Ryan kept getting up, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, introducing friends. When he came back, he nodded toward me as if confirming a fact. "That's my mom." Then his phone buzzed again on the table. Lydia's mother sat nearby, her pearl necklace cool and bright under the light. She leaned in, voice gentle but assessing. "Early flights can be so tiring. Westchester's been damp lately." "Thank you. I'm all right. Luckily, I got a little sleep," I replied. Across the table, a guest lifted their phone screen cheerfully. "Ava, that Cadillac online yesterday, was that really yours? A Celestiq, right?" Another chimed in, "Which dealer did you buy from? It's gorgeous." I started to answer, but Lydia was quicker, smiling smoothly. "Ava has wonderful taste. She knows how to pick what suits her." She clinked glasses with the guest beside her. I smiled politely, offering no further detail. Candles were lit. Ellie closed her eyes to make a wish, cheeks puffed. Applause followed, phones raised high. After the cake was sliced, Ryan lifted his glass. "Thanks, everyone, for being here. We've got a lot of new plans this year, hoping everything goes smoothly." He glanced around the table, landing right on me. "Our family's always in this together, right?" The clink of silverware followed, soft but sharp. Lydia placed a hand on Ellie's shoulder and smiled at her daughter. The servers refilled glasses. Ryan lowered his voice just enough for the nearby guests to hear. "We're expanding. Just the basics, renting another small space, hiring a few good salespeople, pushing marketing. The market's opening up. We just need a little boost." "That's great," someone said encouragingly. "Of course," Ryan continued, Cash flow's a little tight right now. It always is at the start of the year, but opportunities don't wait. Sometimes you've got to move first. Ryan's phone lit up. I caught a glimpse of the screen. Card payment declined. He flipped it face down, smiling. Sorry, just some random notifications. A friend asked, "How much do you need for this round?" "Not much," Ryan said lightly, talking more to the air than to anyone in particular. "Just enough to get us over the first hill. I'll have the exact number this week." The conversation drifted toward the kids' schools, the weather, vacation plans, but that thread stayed taut across the table. Lydia turned to me, her tone gentle. "The children really need stability, especially right now." She looked straight at me. "Ellie's starting a new class this year, lots of unexpected expenses." I took a sip of tea, set the cup down. My voice was calm when I asked, "And if the market slows down? What's your contingency plan?" Ryan paused just long enough for the candles to flicker. Then he smiled, leaning slightly toward me. "That's the beauty of it, Mom. When others slow down, you go faster. This is the moment to act. You know that timing is everything." I asked about the contingency plan, I repeated, my tone unchanged. "There are options," Ryan said, deflecting with another grin. "Let's not talk business tonight. I just want everyone to relax." Lydia smoothed the air between us with a ribbon of words. "After lunch, if you have time, Ryan can show you the proposal. It's all very clear. We want everything transparent within the family." My slice of cake arrived last. The frosting had started to melt, sticking to the knife, a small habit of carelessness. I took a bite. The sweetness bit back. In the living room, Lydia's mother was telling a rehearsed story about her charity club. I stepped onto the porch, a warm cup of milk tea in hand, and looked out at the lawn. The sliding door opened. Ryan came out, tucking his phone into his pocket. "I know you have questions," he said, resting his hand on the railing, "but I'd like you to see the full picture first." "What good is the full picture if the details already fail?" I asked. "Investment," Ryan corrected, squinting slightly. "And faster turnover. Trust me, Mom, we're family." "Family," I echoed, holding his gaze. I waited to see if he would mention the hospital, the missed calls. He didn't. He only added, "Stay a few days. We'll go over everything tomorrow, maybe by the end of the week." "I'll check my schedule," I said. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. Then my son invited me into his office, saying he wanted to discuss the details, to explain this promising new project more thoroughly. Fine, I thought. Let's see just how far he's willing to go before he learns the truth. Ryan's office smelled faintly of polished wood, cool and precise. The large glass doors opened onto a neatly trimmed garden, the hedges cut into perfect squares. He set a tray of water on the desk, 2 crystal glasses clinking softly. "Have a seat, Mom," Ryan said, pulling out a chair with a practiced smile. I sat down, placed my bag beside me, and straightened my back. Ryan opened a fresh folder, pages glossy and full of color, and turned a rising chart toward me. "This is our latest projection," he began evenly. "If we open another space in Midtown, hire 3 key salespeople, and boost the marketing campaign, revenue should spike next quarter. See this green line? That's the conservative scenario." I looked at the swelling numbers stretching into the future, then placed my finger on the empty space beneath the chart. "And if the market slows down, what's your backup plan?" Ryan leaned back, tapping his pen on a chart legend. "Mom, the key is we need more capital to break out of stagnation. Once we pass that threshold, the business sustains itself. There's really nothing to worry about." "You didn't answer my question," he nodded slowly, the smile thinning. "There are always ways to pivot, but trust me, now's not the time to stand still." A soft knock. Lydia entered, setting a thick envelope on the desk. "Market research materials," she said, glancing at me. "We're all hoping for your support to keep things steady for the kids." She gave Ryan's shoulder a light touch before leaving. The door closed gently, like the period at the end of a line. Ryan pulled the envelope closer, flipped a page, then set it down neatly. "So that's the gist," he said. "I'd like you to come in as a family partner. We'll keep monthly reports, everything transparent." I opened my bag and took out a folder stamped in bold black letters, "David Monroe Foundation." I set it in the center of the desk and turned the label toward him. "What's this?" Ryan asked, frowning. "My money's going here," I said calmly, my voice level. "It's a foundation in David's name. Its purpose is to help women over 40 restart their careers. Small, realistic projects, reviewed by an independent board, no favoritism, no hidden strings. The process is simple. Applicants present their case, we verify, release funds in stages, and publish public reports. Ryan blinked. He ran a finger along the folder's edge as if testing its weight, then pulled his hand back. You're using it all? For strangers? I'm using it for people who've been overlooked, I replied. For those who just need one steady hand to get back up. The surprise on his face hardened into irritation. I don't get it. What about family? You say overlooked, but I'm your son. Why would you choose them over me? I'm choosing to show up where presence actually matters, I said, meeting his eyes. Not where it only appears when money's involved. The air in the room shifted. Ryan leaned closer, voice softening into something almost intimate. Mom, I know I've been busy. I haven't been around as much as I should, but you raised me. You invested in me before. Isn't this the time for you to stay with me to help me take things to the next level? You laid the foundation. Let me build on it. I placed my hand on the rough cover of the folder. I've done my part. The rest is yours. He let out a dry laugh that caught in his throat. Easy for you to say. Do you know what I'm carrying? Staff, mortgage, tuition, long-term plans. I just need one push to get over this hill. You're really going to stand by and not help? I am helping, I said. Just not in the way you want. Helping who? He planted both hands on the desk. Those women whose names you don't even know? Their names will be on the records, and their results will be too. That's the difference between vague and real. Ryan fell silent for a moment, twirling his pen between his fingers. Don't you think you should have talked to me first? Given me a heads up? You just show up with this folder and tell me no. You invited me here to pitch a business opportunity, I reminded him. I came to share what I believe in. Lydia appeared at the door again. This time, she didn't come in. Everyone's waiting for the family photo, she said to Ryan, her eyes flicking to the folder, then back to me. For a brief second, there was disappointment in her face before it softened back into composure. Come out when you're done. The door closed. Ryan pressed a hand to his forehead and exhaled. So you've made up your mind? I have. He stared out at the garden, the trees trimmed into perfect geometric shapes. I think you're making things harder for yourself, he said quietly. I think you'll regret missing this chance. Maybe, I said. But I've learned to live through hard times. What I won't do anymore is use money to patch holes that can't face the truth. What's that supposed to mean? He looked up. I asked for your contingency plan, you didn't have one. You said opportunity doesn't wait? Well, opportunity doesn't replace responsibility either. I won't be the life raft you cling to forever. He clenched his jaw, then eased it, his voice losing its polish. Fine, do whatever you want, but don't expect me not to feel betrayed. I slid the folder back into my bag. You're entitled to feel whatever you feel, and I'm obligated to do what's right with what's left of mine. We stood at the same time. Ryan kept his hand on the back of his chair, eyes fixed on the carpet. I walked to the door. The handle was cool. I could hear the wind sifting through the hedges outside, just enough to catch. I turned back and said one last thing, quietly, without emphasis. I'm not closing the door on family. I'm closing it on the old way, the way I used to be treated. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The carpet muffled every sound. From the living room came the steady voices of adults calling the kids for a family photo. I kept walking, straight ahead. The phone in my bag vibrated 3 times. I didn't hurry. When I reached the porch, I pulled out the screen. A message from Ryan. Tomorrow I'll come by your place. We need to talk this through. I turned the screen off, slipped it back into my pocket, and stepped down the stairs. The cold air brushed against my face, clear, sobering. I exhaled, slow and steady, then walked straight toward the gate. The phone started vibrating the moment I got into the car for the airport, and it didn't stop. By the next morning, the messages came in waves. Mom, you misunderstood me. Family doesn't abandon each other. You just need to help me through this phase. Why would you choose strangers over your own? Ryan's tone shifted with every text, pleading, angry, sarcastic, then suddenly gentle again. I looked at each one but didn't reply. Every time my thumb hovered near the keyboard, I put the phone back in the drawer. At my age, silence is an answer. I met with Mr. Carter at noon. He sat behind his desk, straightening a stack of papers before looking up at me. We'll follow protocol, he said evenly, to minimize unnecessary friction. I want to block any contact meant to pressure me. I said. No private meetings, no calls during work hours. He nodded, motioned for his assistant. Draft a letter to Ryan's side, he instructed. From now on, all communication related to finances, requests for support, or personal accusations will go through our office. Advise against direct visits to her home or workplace. Any breach will be documented. Then he turned to me. This protects your privacy and prevents legal misunderstanding. You're doing the right thing. I signed at the bottom of the draft. The ink dried quickly. That afternoon, I stopped by the shared workspace where the foundation was temporarily set up. A long wooden table, 3 chairs, a spotless whiteboard, and a window overlooking an empty parking lot. Mr. Carter's legal aide handed me the updated charter. I read through it, adding 2 lines in red ink, quarterly public reports, and a clearly scheduled interview calendar with written records. We finalized the framework, selection criteria, small, feasible projects led by women over 40 starting again. Interview round, in person or online, focused on execution, no probing into private lives. Usage monitoring. Funds released in phases, basic spending proof required, flexibility for small deviations because life doesn't follow a spreadsheet. I chose 2 people for the review board after careful thought. The first was Carol, who once ran a family bakery that survived inflation and later opened free weekend training classes. Her gaze was steady, her words few, her mind practical. The second was Thomas, a community education advisor at the city library, accustomed to working with adults returning to learn new skills, patient, precise with his questions. When I explained the principle of no favoritism, both simply nodded, no empty promises. We built a transparent system from scratch, a single webpage listing application dates, a short and readable reporting form, 1 contact address for all inquiries. The reason was simple: to avoid rumors about family bias and to keep me out of the trap of endless explanations. The phone buzzed again, this time not Ryan. 2 relatives called, voices full of gentle phrases they'd likely borrowed from somewhere. He's still your son, after all. It's not fair to the kids if you shut the door. I leaned back in my chair and gave them both the same answer. Thank you for your concern. I don't discuss private matters. If needed, my lawyer will reach out. I hung up and exhaled quietly. The hardest part of setting boundaries is accepting being misunderstood. When I got home that evening, a notification chimed: new mail. Mr. Carter had sent me the finalized letter addressed to Ryan's representative. 3 short paragraphs, concise, polite, no reproach, just procedure and contact details. After reading it, I composed another email, this one to Ryan. It took me 5 minutes to strip away every emotional word until only the core remained. Ryan, from today forward, all communication related to finances, support, or any other arising matters must go through Mr. Carter's law office. Address attached. Any unannounced visits to my workplace will be declined. Any calls made during work hours will not receive a response. Mom. I added the date and time, then pressed send. The instant the cursor left the button, the room seemed to dim, as if someone had turned down the volume on an old radio. I leaned back, let out a long breath. No more pleading voices pulling me back, at least, not on paper. I poured a glass of water, drank it all. My heartbeat was steady. Each pulse felt like the first stone laid on a bridge. The next morning, we held our first meeting with Carol and Thomas. We'll move slow but steady, I told them. If an application's unclear, ask directly, no forcing anyone to spill their life story. Carol asked how many projects I planned to fund in the first round. I gave her a modest number. Thomas suggested spreading interview times evenly so no one waited too long. I agreed. By noon, the foundation inbox was already filling up. Most were questions: what documents were needed, how long results would take. A few were heartfelt letters, long and emotional. We saved them, replying with brief notes of thanks and clear instructions. I remembered how much I once hated begging for help. This foundation wouldn't make anyone beg. They only had to prove their plan could stand. Near evening, I missed a call from an unknown number. I didn't call back. A message followed right after. She's changed. I don't even recognize her anymore. No signature. I deleted it and set the phone face down. Night came early. I turned on my desk lamp and cleared space for my laptop. Carol had sent a short checklist, 4 items, all marked. Thomas followed with a draft interview invitation, the language clear and kind. I thanked them both and set a meeting for tomorrow to finalize. As I stood to refill my glass, I noticed a new email in the foundation inbox, its subject line plain enough to blend in. Application for support weekend film class for adult women. I opened it. The sender's name was Maya. She introduced herself briefly: age, location, part-time work. In the middle paragraph, she outlined her plan: a weekend class at the community center, borrowing a room from the library, requesting old cameras from the local college, charging a small fee to cover memory cards and inexpensive lights. No embellishment, just step by step. At the end, her words caught: "I just need someone to see me." I froze. The glass in my hand had grown warm. I looked toward the framed photo of David. In my mind, I could hear the rain from that long-ago night by the riverside, the sound of me pushing a broken car alone. I pulled the chair back, sat down, and clicked the star icon next to Maya's email. The recording studio in Manhattan was cool, just enough to keep me sharp. The reporter handed me a printed outline and said, "We'd like to hear your story." I placed my hand on the table and replied plainly, "Only about David and the foundation. No personal matters. No commentary on anyone." She nodded right away, meeting my eyes. Agreed. The editor adjusted the lights, clipped the mic to my lapel. I could hear the faint hum of the lamps, like someone's quiet breathing. "Ready," the reporter signaled. The red light blinked on. "My husband, David, and I lived in Portland," I began, my tone even. "He was a quiet man. When David passed, I thought I knew everything he'd left behind. I was wrong. He'd been investing patiently for years so that when I no longer had him, I'd still have a foundation. I won't talk numbers, just that it was enough to begin something decent." I paused a beat. "When you have more than you need, the surplus should lift others." "Why women in midlife?" the reporter asked. "Because they're often overlooked right when they need a hand. The foundation will handle the first steps, small and practical. No one should have to spill their life story just to stand back up." The editor gave a subtle thumbs up. The next questions stayed on the agreed path: procedures, transparency, oversight. I kept my answers short: no jargon applications, interviews, phased disbursement, concise reports. I repeated, no favoritism, no circles. Near the end, the reporter lowered her voice. "Would you like to say something to those who hesitate to apply?" I looked straight into the camera. "No one has the right to decide your worth but you. If your plan is clear, send it in. The rest we'll figure out together." When the lights turned off, I thanked the crew. No one asked for anything outside the script. Stepping out of the studio, the wind sliced through the street. I called a car to the Brooklyn Bridge, then drove my Celestiq across its span. It felt like crossing a sentence into its next clause. The city shimmered against the paint. I called Carol and Thomas on speaker. "Tomorrow we open the first round of applications," I said. "Schedule's finalized," Thomas replied. "Invitation templates in the draft folder. The criteria charts live on the site," Carol added. "We're keeping just one contact line, avoids confusion." "Good," I said. "We start tomorrow." That night, in the service department where I was staying, I opened my laptop and saw the interview already published. The photo showed me looking out a window, a short caption about the foundation: "No drama." Within hours, the foundation inbox overflowed. Thank you notes, urgent stories, detailed questions. I replied within the framework: "Thanks, instructions, links." The team followed in sync. Everything was on schedule. By the next day, one of Ryan's familiar contacts posted a public status: "Sometimes misunderstandings make children look greedy. Has anyone asked for the other side of the story?" No names, but everyone knew. In the comments, someone wrote, "Where was he when she was in the hospital?" Then another, "What do you call a family gathering that leaves out the most important person?" The topic fizzled quickly. Rumors don't last long without facts. That afternoon, I had a video call with the board. The screen split into 3. Thomas opened the interview schedule. "We've spread them evenly across 2 weeks. Remote interviews for those far away. You can review the morning slots." "I'll keep the early sessions," I said. "Don't bunch them up. Everyone deserves a quiet space." Carol held up a new checklist. "We should add a clause allowing delays without penalty, so applicants don't feel pressured to be perfect right away." I nodded. Approved. When the call ended, I reclined for a moment. The late Manhattan light slanted through the blinds. The phone buzzed. An unfamiliar address. The first line pulled me upright. Reading your story gave me the courage to apply. The writer explained briefly. Laid off at 47, piecing together small jobs, wanting to open a weekend class teaching office skills to women in the same situation, but afraid of being laughed at. At the end, her words steadied my breath. If I'm chosen, I promise to keep teaching until no one needs the class anymore. Interview invitations left the outbox like tickets to an open door. The first name bolded on the screen. Maya. My heart gave one solid beat. I whispered to myself, let's begin. The interview took place in the foundation's small meeting room, its window overlooking a parking lot lined with white stripes. Maya arrived 10 minutes early, carrying a blue folder and an old camcorder slung across her neck. She looked to be in her early 40s, hair neatly tied, heels worn down. Carol poured water. Thomas checked the recorder, and I nodded in greeting. I'm Maya, she said, setting the folder on the table. I want to start a low-cost filmmaking class for older women. The goal is to help them tell their own stories using phones or old cameras. What's the class structure? Thomas asked. 4 sessions, 2 hours each. Maya continued smoothly. Session 1, simple composition and lighting. Session 2, basic audio using cheap lapel mics, how to avoid wind noise. Session 3, editing with free apps, cutting, trimming, adding text. Session 4, a small screening, feedback, and exporting files. The main expenses are room rental, a few lapel mics, memory cards, and 2 small lights. Where will you hold the class? Carol asked. I've asked the Central Library for weekend room use, Maya said, unfolding a printed email. The manager said if I have basic liability insurance, they'll give priority. Do you plan to charge tuition? I asked. Yes, a symbolic $10 for the whole course, she replied. Enough for people to value their participation, but still low enough that no one's excluded for lack of money. Maya glanced down at her hands for a moment before looking back up. I've struggled with confidence for a long time. I used to work backstage at art exhibits always on time, everything running smoothly, but no one ever remembered my name. I want women like me to step in front of the camera, just once, to have someone sit across from them and truly listen. I nodded, keeping to the plan. Let's stay on the project itself. If selected, how soon could you launch? If the funding comes this month, I can start the first class in 6 weeks, Maya answered. I already have 8 women signed up. We asked a few more questions, backup plans if equipment failed, what to do if classes filled up, how she'd measure results. Maya answered with clear, realistic steps, no grand promises. When she left, Carol twirled a pen between her fingers. Straightforward, feasible, and immediate impact, she said. Transparent budget, Thomas added. Possible risk if the library delays, but she's got a backup venue at the Community Arts Center. I opened the scoring sheet. After a long series of unclear or incomplete applications, we finally finished the first round. Maya ranked near the top one of the 3 brightest proposals. I typed a note. Prioritize for round 2 interview. Verify venue and insurance conditions. I later met Maya at the local arts center for a mentoring session. The multipurpose room was modest, its walls hung with student paintings. Maya spread her papers and set her old camera on the table. I think Saturday afternoons work best, she said. But many women babysit grandkids on weekends. Then split it into 2 groups, I suggested. Wednesday evenings and Sunday mornings. Don't cram it all in one day. Max 10 people per group. Make the rules clear. If someone misses more than 1 class, they move to the next session. What about the equipment? Maya asked, worried. Good lapel mics are still pricey. Contact the media department at the local college, I said. They often have old gear to retire. Write a formal request for in-kind donations, explain the purpose, and credit them in the end titles. People like seeing their contribution matter. Maya jotted notes quickly. And lighting? Don't overreach, I said. Buy 2 small lights, but teach students to use window light. Demonstrate first, film yourself with the phone, once with lights off, once with them on, then compare. Maya laughed, a short, genuine sound. I can do that. By noon, I returned to the foundation's office. Just as I stepped out of the elevator, the security guard called softly, Mrs. Ava, There's a man waiting in the lobby asking for you. He says he's your son. I paused a second, then nodded. Thank you. Please keep him in the waiting area. I'll handle it according to protocol. The lobby gleamed bright. Ryan stood near the reception desk, hands in his coat pockets. When he saw me, he stepped forward, his voice low. So this is how far you'll go to avoid me? I just want to talk. I already sent an email, I said, keeping a measured arm's length. All communication goes through Mr. Carter. I didn't come to ask for money, he said through clenched teeth. I came to talk to my mother. No personal discussions in the workplace, I replied. I nodded at the guard. He understood, polite, but firm. Sir, this building requires appointments and an internal contact escort. Otherwise, we'll have to ask you to leave. Ryan gave a short, bitter laugh, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. You think keeping your hands clean means letting your lawyer speak for you? Then he turned to the guard. I'm leaving. I didn't follow. The silence of procedure is the strongest shield. I sent a short notice to building management. Family member arrived without appointment. Please reinforce visitor policy and direct all correspondence to legal office. I could, Mr. Carter. His reply came in 7 minutes. Received. Proceed as outlined. That afternoon, Maya sent her updated plan. 2 class schedules, a list of volunteers to watch children for the first hour, a preliminary approval email from the library, and a budget trimmed by 10%. I added notes. Prepare class rules. Silence phones. Respect others' stories. No filming anyone without consent. Then I replied, excellent. Just add a backup plan for lighting, keep a spare bulb kit. On announcement day, I called Maya before sending the official email. She answered so quickly I knew she'd been waiting by the phone. Maya, the foundation has chosen your project for the first round of funding, I said. Let's meet to sign the papers. There was a half-second of silence, then a soft inhale like someone setting down a long-held weight. Finally, someone truly sees me, she said. At the Arts Center, I laid the contract and payment schedule on the table. Maya's hand trembled slightly, but her signature was steady. I clasped her hand, not tightly. Just keep going. We'll handle the rest together. Maya smiled with her eyes. I have 2 people who want to volunteer. One knows video editing, the other's good with subtitles. Give them defined roles, I said. You're still the lead teacher. Don't let the class turn into a free-for-all. That evening, the foundation inbox pinged a formal notice of the upcoming event. The Portland Arts Center would host the foundation's launch ceremony. Attached was a soft-printed invitation card, illustrated with 2 hands lifting a small beam of light. I held the card and returned to my desk. The photo of David tilted slightly, probably from when I last dusted. The late sunlight cut across the glass, landing as a thin stripe over his name. I straightened the frame. The invitation's last line read, "A legacy begins with a single right act." I leaned the card against the frame and stepped back. The room was still. Outside, the sound of distant traffic drummed softly like a heartbeat. I stood there another minute, thinking only that tomorrow I'd have to wake early to choose the right outfit, not too formal, not too casual, just enough to say that I was there to do the work, not to be seen by anyone in particular. The stage at the Art Center was warm, like a steady breath. Soft yellow light spread across the painted brick wall, illuminating a simple banner, David Monroe Foundation, followed by a single line of purpose. David's photo sat on a small wooden stand at the side dark frame. No flowers, no ribbon. I stood behind the curtain, fingertips brushing the edge of a blank note card. Carol looked over and gave me a thumbs up. Thomas adjusted the mic on my lapel. Everything was just right. The host gave a short introduction, then stepped aside. I walked onto the stage. The audience wasn't large, but it was solid community faces, local reporters, a few donors, and the first round of grant recipients. I took a breath. My name is Ava, I said evenly. This past year, my life has opened and closed to the sound of machines, heart monitors, an old heater, a teapot. I've lain in a white hospital room, returned to an empty house, held a letter from Mr. Carter, and watched David's papers open a door I hadn't seen before. I won't talk about numbers only, that it was enough to start something good. And I chose to use the surplus to lift others. I paused, my gaze landing briefly on David's photo. This foundation is for women who were overlooked at the moment they most needed a hand. We don't ask them to tell their life stories. We ask, what is your plan? And what do you need to begin? No names were used as examples, no blame aimed anywhere. Every word faced forward, like a newly paved road. Maya was invited on stage to represent the recipients. She rested both hands on the podium and spoke clearly. A low-cost filmmaking class for older women, 4 sessions, 2 hours each, held at the library and the arts center, using borrowed college equipment, a token tuition fee. I want each of them to make at least one video telling their own story, she said, eyes bright. When we see ourselves on screen, we believe we exist. The room filled with long, sincere applause. I stepped down, meeting Maya at the bottom of the stairs, touching her shoulder gently, a pulse of connection. She smiled, tucking her trembling hands into her dress pockets. In the 4th row, Carol was writing something in her notebook. Thomas leaned toward the library's representative, exchanging a few quiet words. They nodded. After the event, I sat in the backstage room. My inbox glowed. An email from Ryan Long, words packed tight, like someone trying to put furniture back in place after a storm. Mom, I saw the news about the event. I don't want to argue anymore. Please let me see you. I know I was wrong. I wasn't there when you needed me. I'll change. I'll do whatever you ask. I set the phone down, counted to 3, then typed my reply. The words were neither harsh nor gentle, just a line drawn between 2 fields. Ryan, if you want to meet, you must first clearly acknowledge your absence and the harm you caused. After that, you must begin personal therapy for a sufficient period, with scheduled sessions and professional confirmation. During that time, we maintain boundaries of respect. Communication by email only, no visits to my workplace. Once those conditions are met, I'll consider a brief, limited meeting. Mom. I reread it, deleted one soft adjective, and sent it. The email left. The room settled back into quiet. Outside, the team was taking down the banner. The sound of tape peeling off paper cracked sharp and clean like the sound of a promise. Dinner was held at a small restaurant by the river. 2 wooden tables pushed together, mismatched chairs. Carol shared how her bakery had just received a used oven from a restaurant that closed. Thomas talked about a group of middle-aged students who'd once feared the computer mouse like a wild animal, but, after 6 weeks, were emailing their grandkids. Maya showed us a picture on her phone, 2 lapel mics donated by a college professor. The library agreed to let us use the room every Sunday, she said, her voice steady, as if laying a brick. Everyone laughed warm, not loud. I poured more water and looked at each face. When the talk returned to what still needed doing, the laughter flowed naturally again. I left a little later. The city night stretched over the river like a black silk cloth dusted with gold. I drove the Cadillac along the waterfront, window half down. The cold air slipped in, brushing my neck like a friend, reminding me not to fall asleep. My heartbeat was steady. No machines hummed between the breaths, only tires and air. At a red light, I opened the glove compartment and took out David's old letter. The paper had yellowed a bit more. One line remained perfectly straight. Live by what you believe. I folded it carefully and set it on the dashboard, like placing a small stone at the edge of water. I parked overlooking the river. The surface was still. The lampposts stretched long reflections, like faint ink strokes on paper. I didn't call anyone. I didn't wait for anyone. I rested my head against the seat and watched the faint horizon. It's time to live my own part, I whispered. The words fell into the cabin, not echoing back. I shifted into drive. The car rolled forward, city lights shrinking behind me into tiny dots. In the rearview mirror, the road I'd traveled unspooled curves, slopes, an old bridge. Ahead, the asphalt opened wide, promising nothing but firm traction and clear lines. That was enough. The message closed quietly inside me. No need to hang it on a wall. The finest revenge is a steady life, one where those who once hurt you have no power to touch it. True legacy isn't listed in an estate report, but lives in the people lifted from the dark. And peace doesn't need anyone's approval. It comes when you rest your hand on the wheel, look straight ahead, and keep going. The story you just heard is fictional, but every breath, every tear, every line in Ava Monroe's file reflects real women out there. Women who stayed silent for too long, until one day they realized that silence, too, can kill slowly, quietly, more cruelly than any wound. Names and details have been changed to protect the identities of those who might be recognized. We tell this story not to glorify a strong mother, but to remind you that sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, it's about survival. It's about living on, strong enough that no one can ever control you again with guilt or fear. If you've ever been dismissed, erased, or written out of your own story, let this be your reminder. You have the right to reclaim not just justice, but your voice. Leave a comment if you believe that steadfastness can be the most beautiful form of justice, quiet, steady, but never defeated. And if you believe the truest revenge is living a life built on your own strength, share this video because someone out there may need to see that it's still possible to begin again, even when no one seems to stand beside them. Don't forget to subscribe, because here, every story is proof that peace isn't the end. It's the ultimate victory of those who were once broken. On the final screen, we'll leave you with 2 more stories about people who learned to rise, not to strike back, but to truly live. I promise you won't just watch, you'll feel it.